Hey everybody, welcome to the Team Building Podcast. This is Matt Johnson. Sadly, Jeff cannot join us today, but we've got a killer guest who's going to do just as good a job as Jeff would have done anyway, because we've got Chris Waters here, and we're going to talk about how to systematically fill your recruiting bench, basically recruit the best people, but not just that. We're going to talk about how to recruit the recruiter. So Chris has a full-time recruiter on his team, and we're going to talk about how he found him, trained him, onboarded him, what that guy's personality profile is, what his role is on the team, and then all the systems that are built around him that make him successful. And then we'll also dive into Chris's newest book that's coming out, The $1 Million Real Estate Team, right?
Yep, you got it.
Cool.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about the history behind his team a little bit. We'll get into that in the second half. So first of all, Chris, let's jump in. How are you?
Good, man. Appreciate you having me on. I look forward to kind of spilling the beans on what we do to build our team and kind of our recruiting process. So
cool. Well, let's start with the basics. Just where are you guys at? Where's the foundation team, and what does that team look like?
So our primary, so we have an independent brokerage here in Austin, Texas, and even though we're a brokerage, we don't just have an open door policy and like hire every single real estate agent that comes to us.
Right.
So it's run more like the team model. So, think inside sales, buyer agents, listing agents, transaction coordinators, et cetera. So that's kind of the model we implement. Our team here in Austin will do somewhere between 600 and 700 transactions. We're on pace to do somewhere between 600 and 700 transactions this year. And we have a expansion team that we set up in Amarillo, which is like 9 hours north of us. That was our first go at expansion. And we partnered with this amazing agent in Amarillo, which is a small town north of Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
And started with her about 2 years ago. And in her first full year, she grew 300%, did just shy of 100 deals.
Nice.
It was freaking awesome. And and then we found another guy that we partnered with in San Antonio. And basically, like, both these people had kind of hit a ceiling from like a production perspective, and they didn't really know how to grow beyond that. And so we kind of helped provide the roadmap, the coaching, the tools, and all the ingredients to bake the cake of a successful team. Mm-hmm. I guess as a company as a whole, like between our three teams, and I use the word team, I think loosely, because I know the definition of team, like in the industry, is right. You've got a real estate shop underneath somebody else's brokerage.
Right.
That's not really how it works for us, but it's a team environment. So, but I think as a whole, like we'll probably do somewhere between 900 and 1,000 transactions, and most of those being obviously out of Austin. And I started the team back in the summer of 2010, just being totally ignorant, not knowing what I was getting myself into. I was just in a pretty sweet spot. I was generating more leads than I could handle, and recruiting became a necessity to work right. Inbound leads coming in. So
cool. Very cool.
Stop me at any point, by the way, man. I feel like I don't want to have diarrhea of the mouth. So
no, that's good, because it gives people a good kind of jumping off point. There's two quick clarifying questions that I know people are going to ask. Number one, for the number of deals that you're producing, how big is the team in Austin?
So last year, we did close to 500 deals in Austin, and we had two full-time listing agents. All they did were go on listing appointments. We had a inside salesperson that was booking the appointments and taking inbound calls and booking those appointments. And then we had a total of 8 or 9 buyer's agents. And then I had my transaction management team and like back-end marketing team basically looked like a listing manager and 3 transaction coordinators, 1 for the buy side, 2 for the listing side. And then I had kind of like a guy that was head of the transaction team, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then I also had somebody that was head of the sales team. And then I kind of was like, wore the hat of CEO, CMO, CTO, I was managing those kind of high level activities. Mm-hmm. And then actually it was just until last year, like we started putting, more people in place. So now we have like a director of sales, we have a director of lead generation, director of operations. We actually outsource like the finance side. So this was a really cool thing. Maybe I know this has nothing to do with recruiting, but a aha that I had a year ago was there are some amazing resources out there with like CFOs that work on a consulting basis that have like a vast amount of experience in the
Mm-hmm.
in a CFO role. And so I found this company that offered consultants that were super high level CFOs, and you basically pay per hour. And so they help you build
Nice.
like pro formas in budgets so you can be really disciplined to your financial metrics.
Okay.
So like we've got somebody on our team we work with super closely. It's kind of like a coach and partner for the CFO role. And then we've got several different people that kind of oversee the marketing side, depending on what it is for us. Our director of lead generation is kind of, the one that ultimately he's got all the responsibility for the marketing side, but he works with like multiple vendors, like viral marketing and different
Mm-hmm.
lead generation tools, that help manage different things for us.
Hmm.
So
How long ago was it? How long ago was it that you gave up that role?
So those very high level roles, I literally gave those up about 7 months ago.
Okay. Yeah.
And so like I had a buyer agent team leader, and I had a kind of head of transaction management.
Mm-hmm.
But I was still like, again, you think about a Fortune 500 company, you got like CMO, CEO, like head of sales, all those
Mm-hmm.
executive kind of tasks from a high level perspective. Like I was doing all of those things. And now like I'm only in charge of like the strategic direction and reviewing our quarterly tactical operating priorities, like make sure we're prioritizing the most important things to get us where we need to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent like the better half of last year putting in like key leadership. And I think that was probably one of my biggest ahas in developing a team is, as you're recruiting people, you want to find your future leaders of your
Right.
organization, because it's just, you're not going to have like long-term work-life balance and like get out of the weeds of running a business if you're, wearing the hat of all these different roles.
Oh yeah.
So I spent the better half of last year, like, putting those people in place and training them and shadowing and
Mm-hmm.
letting them, follow me and just kind of leading by example for them. So
Very
yeah.
cool. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I was going to say that's typically, I mean, that's especially the lead generation and marketing is one of the very, very, very last things you give up, if ever. I mean, we both know Frank real well from Viral. That is, he will never give that up, right?
Yeah.
It's just not, that's never going to happen. That's what he's passionate about. And so
Yep.
he is and always will be the director of lead generation for his business. That's just,
Mhm.
that's the way the way he is. But so let's get into the recruiting piece a little bit, and then we'll dive into some of the other team stuff. So on the recruiting side, how long has that like been an established role? And let's go back to the point where you were doing it all, and what did that look like compared to what it looks like now?
Yep. So basically, like summer of 2010, I'm generating massive leads, and I just put my head down and started becoming like a recruiting ninja. I was just
Mm,
on the phone, hammering the phone, calling agents, and I was calling agents that were really experienced because I wasn't that experienced of an agent. I was like 25 at the time. Yeah, I was like 25 years old. And so
mhm.
like I didn't have that much experience as an agent. And so, I wanted to find people that knew the industry, knew all the technical stuff, didn't require a lot of training or hand holding. And I would provide them the leads and they'd go out and close the deals. And so I recruited 15 salespeople just basically by, being a cold calling, machine,
Okay.
prospecting agents and saying, hey, my name's Chris Waters. I've got a company here in Austin. I'm in a unique position. I thought I'd throw an opportunity at you. Do you have any interest in growing your business any further? And just, ask them, and most people ask them that question, and most people are like, yeah, I'd love to grow my business more. And I'm like, cool, I've got more leads than I can handle. When's a good time for us to sit down and meet? Do mornings or afternoons work better? It's like super basic script, super simple. And like, lots of people told me no, and it was just a numbers game, just like
Hmm.
prospecting. And so, within a matter of 90 days, I recruited 15 people.
Okay.
14 of those were the absolute worst, decisions I've made from a recruiting perspective, and I made all my mistakes with all those people. Uh,
Okay.
and so, basically, to make a long story short, a year goes by, and I've got these 15 salespeople that are crazy experienced. Like there were like 2 people on the team that had been in the industry longer than I had been alive,
Right.
and I was also actively producing. I was going on appointments, working with buyers and sellers, and a year goes by and our team sold, I think, again, like 15 people. This is what is ludicrous. We had 15 people plus me and an admin person. And I think we sold like like between 90 and 100 houses in that 12-month period.
Mm-hmm.
And I sold just short of like 40 homes. And I was like, dude, what is wrong? And
Okay.
so, speaking of the book, my co-author, Brad, he was literally one of those 15 people. He's the only person
He's
that
the
stayed
only
on
one
the team.
left.
And yes, yeah. And so I went to Brad and I was like, Brad, like after a year of having this team, I was like, or brokerage, whatever, I was like, we got to burn this down. Like this does not work. Like I just couldn't, if you run a big box brokerage, it's like an agent count game. It's all about having as
Right.
many agents as humanly possible. And like, it just drove me nuts, like the mediocrity of just
Mm-hmm.
having people on the team and like they were performing, like the average agent. I didn't know at the time that the average agent only sold like 5 to 6 homes a year. Like I didn't understand that back in 2010 and I didn't know that.
Okay.
And so like they were all performing like, the average
Yeah.
agent out
They're
there.
doing what they do.
But in my mind, it was like, dude, what is wrong with these agents?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why can't they perform at a higher level? And so I went to Brad and I was like, dude, we got to burn this down, man. Like, you're the only one performing. Like, between the two of us, we sold like 80 of these 90 some odd deals.
Okay.
And so I said, Brad, would you be interested in being a team leader for the buy side of the business? And I'll focus on the listing side.
Sure.
So I basically showed Brad what I was doing for recruiting. Like literally, nobody knew who I was. I was super young, like neither one of us, me or Brad. And I showed Brad how I just would pick up the phone and start calling people and saying, hey, I've got an opportunity for you. I've got more leads than I can handle. Are you interested in growing your business? Like super simple script. And so I taught Brad that, and then he started going out and implementing and doing the same thing. Just prospecting agents, getting them on the phone, having face-to-face meetings, coffee, whatever. And so he slowly started building the buyer agent team, and I just focused on the listing side. And Brad and I were super close. Like we were, going back, we were always obviously talking and communicating about things that worked and what didn't work.
Right.
And we tried so many different things on the recruiting side, and like trying to identify people that were going to work out and like be amazing. And
Mm-hmm.
basically, the show's not long enough to tell you about all my failures because, like, honestly, I feel
Yeah,
like,
so it's limit it to the top one or two, basically.
yeah, I mean,
Charlie Munger style.
yeah, like exactly. I love that guy, by the way, Charlie Munger.
Yeah.
He's got some amazing YouTube footage with him and Warren Buffett.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, Brad and I, like, dude, we tried everything. Like we tried
Okay.
like this very regimented, like school type deal where people came in like from 8 to 5 and we had like this amazing course outline and got real technical with contracts and like all this stuff.
Okay.
And, tried to help them kind of get, a lot of industry knowledge and like understand all the technical details. And then like in the last week, we would start focusing on like buyer presentations, role playing, calling leads, scripting and stuff like that.
Okay.
And we weren't.
So basically trying to help them overcome the lack of confidence in their own industry knowledge, right? Thinking that was the problem.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay. So how'd that work out?
So we recruited a bunch of agents, and like the next year we grew. We went from like 90 to 100 some odd deals, and the following year we did like 100, just short of 150, and that was with like a totally brand new team, like because we got rid of everybody, and so we did 150, and so pretty solid year considering we had a brand new team. I think we had like 6 or 7 agents. So we started, having more success because the one key trigger we implemented was going after agents that were newer.
Mm-hmm.
So either they were brand new or they had been in the industry for less than 2 years. So that was like one kind of pivot that helped us, kind of improve our talent bench. But ultimately, like as time progressed, what we realized is no matter how many books we read on recruiting and interviewing and trying to identify talent just from like a face-to-face meeting, I mean, ultimately the odds are stacked against you. Like, someone's ability to like point, to point to somebody and say, you're going to be amazing and you are going to sell 100 homes a year, right? Like just from, maybe like a couple hours together, just like in an interview style deal, like your odds of being able to pick that person out are like, dude, stacked against you, like,
right,
exponentially. And so I remember reading this book, which I'd highly recommend anybody on this podcast go pick up and buy. It's called The Rare Find by a guy named George Anders. And this dude dedicated his entire life to finding out what makes people tick and what makes them successful. And so like there's one chapter in the book where he talks about hanging in a tree, and he was like at this Navy SEAL training camp, and he's like watching Navy SEALs from up high with like one of the drill sergeants or whatever.
Okay.
And you know, it basically, like what I kind of took from that example was like when you're building a team, right? A team model where it's about efficiency, your team members performing at a really high level,
Right.
and you providing a lot of value to your agents. You need your team members to, you know, be, I mean, basically like Navy SEALs, right? Like they can't be mediocre, average people. If your business model is to have, you know, 10 to 20 salespeople, like you need every single one of those to be a badass.
Right.
So we start, like a huge shift that happened for us was after reading that book, we started doing two things differently. One is in the interview process. We started, you know, after we kind of went through like some basic questionnaire stuff and like tried to understand more about that person and kind of their trajectory in life and their goals and core values and all that kind of stuff. We started doing like basically we would set up a real world setting where we would bring in a buyer's agent, for example, and we would make them give a buyer presentation to somebody else on the team as part of the interview process.
Okay.
And so, you know, basically what we would tell the people on our team is like, your goal is to throw objections at this candidate that's interested in joining our team,
Okay.
and see how they respond. Because you know, when you're trying to recruit and select people, the only way you're going to know if somebody's got what it takes is to see them in action. Like actually asking them questions about like, you know, what did your former manager say that is like a strength of yours or a weakness or whatever. Like that's such canned BS. It doesn't work. So you've got to see how people actually perform in a real world setting. So doing like a role play session as part of your interview process, you're going to see how people respond, because they're going to treat your leads just like that, right? Like if you put one of your leads or customers in front of them, they're going to act that same way. So, you know, when we would tell people on our team, like as you're interviewing, as we're doing the role play, we'd say throw objections, and ultimately what we were looking for is how do those candidates respond. And so the ideal salesperson comes back with like a question, you know, when they get an objection. So if they're like, Matt, you're like, I just don't think you've got what it takes to be my real estate agent. Like, I don't think you have enough experience. So the right salesperson would come back and say, well, if you don't mind me asking, like, what does experience mean to you?
Right.
Or what more are you looking for in an agent?
Mm-hmm.
You come back with questions and try to identify the real core of the objection, and then isolate that and try to overcome it. So
Gotcha.
that's what the ideal salesperson does.
Okay.
The wrong salesperson is either going to shut down and they're just going to freeze, or the third response you're going to get is they get diarrhea of the mouth. Like they start getting kind of defensive, and they just start talking about how great they are. And like that is the wrong kind of person to, be trying to bring onto your team. Okay. So that was another key pivot, was like
I like it.
Implementing that in the interview process. And then the third thing was, so we still have kind of this like 30-day ramp up process for people coming into the organization. And instead of getting really technical and in the weeds and stuff with like contracts and all that stuff, I mean, we do a little bit of that, but it's like 20%. 80% of what we do in that first 30 days is about getting them to actually perform, start calling leads, mastering their scripts, writing the scripts, role playing, shadowing, and get them on the phone and start trying to book appointments, and then get them shadowing other buyer agents on the team, getting them to actually go on appointments with leads, and try to get a buyer rep sign. And so actually, for anybody watching the podcast, like that's ultimately like the life cycle of a real estate agent. It's like generate leads, convert the lead, service the customer, and then follow up with your past clients. So, you want to see how agents do at each of those things. So in that first 30 days, we have these really high performance metrics where they have to hit 75 contacts in a week. 75 contacts. A contact is somebody that you have a physical conversation with. They could hang up on you, whatever. It's just you physically have a conversation with them. And so what we found is like, I guess as an analogy, or, just to give an illustration, there's a movie called G.I. Jane with Demi Moore. Have you seen that?
It's been a long time.
Yeah, it came out a long time ago. I mean, she's basically like training to be a Navy SEAL. I keep going back to this Navy SEAL example. But when she's in Navy SEAL training, like they have this huge bell, and as guys and gals are going through Hell Week, like they can just peace out and ring this bell and say, I'm done. Like, I don't want to commit to being a Navy SEAL, right? Well, so like when we started implementing this process in the first 30 days, where agents had to actually start doing like 80% of the job of an agent, right? Which is like, generating leads and converting them into appointments. When we made that like the primary core of that 30-day ramp up, like basically on week 2 and 3, like people started, in a sense ringing the bell.
Right.
Like I'd have people come to me and say, you know what, I didn't realize this is what real estate was about. Like I had no idea how much of a time commitment it would be to like prospecting on the phone.
Yeah.
And, like trying to get face to face with people. And then like, I don't enjoy prospecting on the phone and talking to leads and try to convince them to meet me face to face. Like they just, the average person thinks like you come into the industry and people just walk in the door and they're like referrals. And like you can't build a big business off referrals only when you first get started as an agent.
Yep.
So literally that was like the game changer when we started, basically getting people on the team that performed at a really high level. And so just to give you an idea, when I say high level, what I mean is like my average listing agent is selling between 75 and 125 homes just by themselves.
Right.
And then our buyer's agents are selling, worst case scenario in their first year, at least 25 to 30 homes. And again, these are brand new agents in their first year on the buy side.
Okay.
So I think those are like, the 3 key pivots that we kind of learned was like, number one, find people that are new to the business, don't have bad habits, super hungry, implement like kind of a role play as part of the interview process. And then third, put in place something in that 30-day ramp up where people are actually going to be like super immersed in what their day is actually going to look like once they're going to be an agent trying to get clients.
Makes total sense. I like the role playing part. There's a lot there, but that definitely resonates with what I've heard other people say. That's something that when I hire, anybody from my team, it's always, they start off with an actual real world test of, either doing at the actual work that they'd be doing, a small sample of it. And I'll even pay them to do it, if I have to. Just to get the real world experience of what working with them is like, and just get past the interview process where they say anything to please you, essentially, to make you happy. Yep. And then the immersion part. So you're essentially setting up almost like an apprenticeship system within your team, right? So are they assigned to one specific person? Is there a system set up where they're going, like, how are they shadowing agents, and how is that set up?
So in the beginning, it was just, we had a buyer agent team leader, which was Brad. Like I mentioned, the dude does the co-author.
So he does a lot, but yeah.
Yeah. And in the beginning, like he was running like the training and recruiting and, doing the role playing and like getting people, to start getting them on the phone and like listening to them. And, and then he would personally make calls too. So he, that's how it started out in the beginning. Now, because like our goal now is like the next book we write, I want it to be on how to scale a team to 3,000 transactions. Like that's my big, hairy, audacious goal.
Okay.
To scale a team to 3,000 transactions. So like the organizational things we put in place over the last year have changed a lot. Like I've started putting in these very key leaders, and then we put in place a full-time recruiter. I've had actually that person for a while. It's just they would wear multiple hats, but now like we have one person that's all they do. For the last basically 2 years, we've had a full-time person. That's all they do is recruiting.
Okay.
Forgot my ADD kicked in. What?
Going back to how they were assigned. Initially, it was Brad. They were just kind of shadowing Brad.
Mm-hmm.
Now that and Brad stepped into higher role, and he's doing more operations and more management, more leadership.
Yep.
So are they shadowing key buyers agents that you just feel like are leaders within the team?
Exactly. Yep. So that what I meant to say before my ADD kicked in was basically like we dedicated like a full-time lead coordinator / trainer. And so our full-time like trainer leads that 30-day kind of ramp up now. And like that's her full-time job, is like spending half her day leading that that ramp up process for new agents. And so she's teaching them best practices. She's teaching them scripts. She's teaching them how to use all the systems. And then she spends the other half of the day listening to them on the phone, listening to other agents in the office on the phone, like listening to the recordings and how they sound and the scripting and objection handling. And then she's also going into our different lead generation tools, and she's making sure that the agent she hired the previous 30 days and the one she's working with now are all implementing best practices from a lead conversion perspective. So that's literally a full-time job now, because like her job is to basically help us increase our conversion rates on our leads coming in. So she kind of wears two hats, training new people coming in, and then, making sure that the team continues to implement best standards. Now we have a director of sales who like leads ongoing training and does like weekly 411s and coaching and whatnot for those agents. But for a lot of people listening to this, like it's going to start out like I explained earlier, where you've got, I would recommend, like if you're a solo agent and you're trying to build a team, like the first thing is just, you're going to have to really stretch yourself, and you're going to have to build a team and also go get out there and produce deals. And then hopefully, once you've got a team of a couple people, you're going to identify your partner that's going to really help you build the team. So I heard Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank, right? She said every successful organization has an empire builder and an empire protector. And so like Brad, for example, like he was one of my early agents, and like he was the empire protector. Like he always was working super hard on trying to make sure everybody was implementing best practices, from lead conversion to servicing the customer, and just overall just trying to help everybody, do better on the team, and was always focused on the bigger picture. So recruit a couple agents, try to identify your first empire protector or empire builder. If, for example, you're listening to this and you're more the empire protector, you need to go find your, you need to go find your empire, whatever the opposite of what you are. Yeah, it's kind of like Captain Kirk and Spock, right? Like every successful organization starting out, like you got to have both. So yeah, that's kind of how it can develop in the early days, and then you can obviously add more people as your revenue grows and gets more streamlined, and you start taking off more hats as your team grows and gets bigger.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's the progression that everybody has to go through. So you've had the recruiter for a couple of years. He's wearing all these hats, and of course, it eventually kind of gets narrowed down. Tell me a little bit more about that person's personality and how you came across them, and why they're in that role now, full-time recruiter.
So I think your first like buyer agent team leader, for example, that's wearing multiple hats, that's got to be a really special person, because they've got to be somebody that really, is trying. It comes from like a servant's heart, like they really want to help other people succeed, and they also have to be really ambitious and driven. So there's also like there's people out there, like the empire builder mindset is like, you're going to be the guy that like has your face and name on everything. And like, it's not an ego thing, but like you want to be the one in charge, if you will, like really pushing the envelope, right? That's kind of the empire builder. Well, your empire protector is kind of a toned down version of that, but wants to help with like processes and best practices and things like that, but still has an eye on the bigger picture.
Right.
Sorry, again, your original question, I don't know if I did a good job answering it. But
the full-time recruiter. Because we want to focus on, I think people are very curious about because this is the challenge that everybody faces. If you overcome the challenge of, okay, what is my lead generation system, right?
Yep.
So that's what every agent, every solo agent, and every team leader struggles with that. But the fortunate ones that really power through that phase, and they spend the money, they spend the time, they invest the sweat to figure out what that is. They're like, great, now I have more leads than I can handle. I cannot multiply myself fast enough, right? So then it becomes, how do you build the system, right? Now it's not about lead generation from homeowners and sellers; it's about lead generation for recruits. So I want to talk about that. Like, what is the full-time recruiter doing? What is their personality like? Let's start with just who they are. If you had to go out knowing what you know now, let's say you started over from scratch and you're building a team, you've got some of the other pieces in place. What's the personality profile that you would go look to hire right now for a full-time recruiter?
Okay, so a full-time recruiter spends a vast amount of their time on the phone trying to set appointments. So like we'll probably, I'm sure we'll dive into this, like lead generation tools to like generate potential talent to join your team. So there's reactive lead gen from a talent perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's proactive lead gen.
Right.
And, when you don't have a big brand like in your city, it's hard to get, highly talented people to join your organization and recognize your name when you're running ads on sites like Indeed.com, Craigslist, Career Builder, Monster, whatever, Facebook ads to recruit people, whatever. It's harder to recruit people. Your results aren't going to be as good when you have when you don't really have like some dominant, name within the community. So your first recruiter has to be really good at inside sales. And so kind of the personality profile is going to be somebody that's has got the gift to gab, like they're high I. They love like connecting with people, and they love building relationships, but also is very driven. So an ID personality profile is really ideal for a recruiter. So relationships and results, that's what's really important. And so
Right.
again,
So in other words, you're saying that just to step back a second. So like because I asked you if you had to start over again. Right. So you're saying like your first recruiter should be someone that's really good at inside sales because you don't have the brand name. You're getting less of you have to do more proactive than reactive and stuff like that. Right. Is there a point that you feel like you cross where your name gets big enough in the city where you can have someone that isn't quite so inside sales heavy as your recruiter? They're more relationship driven, or should you always have someone that's just pounds the phone?
I think you have someone that is constantly always pounding the phone. What ends up happening is as your brand and there's more awareness in the real estate agent community. As time progresses and that awareness is created, it just makes the conversion of like potential appointments to meet people face to face improve dramatically. So like when your recruiter is on the phone, like proactively calling people, and they say, "Hey, I'm with the Chris Waters team in Austin, Texas," like they're like, "Oh yeah, I hear him everywhere. Like I know he's like got the #1 team in Austin, Texas. I'd love to meet with you and learn more about your program." And I didn't think you guys hired new agents. Like that's the common response.
Really?
Yeah. People don't think we're hiring new agents for some reason. So anyways, so yeah, I mean you'll be surprised like why people don't reach out to you once you actually start building a brand.
Weird. Yeah, like we're so steeped in that. We run in this all day, every day. And I would have never thought of that. Because we're like we're so focused on we got to find agents that are in the business less than 2 years. They've done less than 10 or 15 transactions. Like we know that. And then, I don't even think about it in terms of them coming in and going, "Oh, I could never work for that team. There's no way they would hire an agent like me." And we're going, "No, you're exactly who I want because you don't have a ton of bad habits. So please come apply for my team."
Yep.
Okay. All right. So you're reaching out to them. So what's the ask? So,
I mean, the value proposition is
the value proposition
training.
for the appointment.
Yeah. You can't really get into the training. I mean, what the kind of the silver bullet, if you will, is our leads. Telling them you have the opportunity to give them leads that are very high quality and will help them grow their business. Like that's the silver bullet, if you will, that's going to get the face-to-face meeting with them. But ultimately what makes agents successful is not the leads. It's having great leadership in place to like help coach and train those salespeople to capitalize on those leads. So,
and this is the struggle, I think, for anyone that runs, whether you're running a real estate team, it's still a coaching organization, but I think it's especially obvious if it's a pure coaching or consulting organization because you're selling the ability to get other people results, right? So I've been thinking a lot about this lately where people are drawn in by the tactics. And we know on the back end that it's not the tactics that gets them results. It's different strategies, different mindsets. It's all the inner game stuff. It's all the mental stuff. Like we know that. The problem is you can't sell them on that. You have to give them the tactics they want first, get them in the door. Then they realize, oh, wait a minute. I can't just do this one little tactical thing and solve the problem because I've got all this stuff on the inside that's going on. Now they have to feel that problem. You can't sell them on a problem they don't feel like they don't have. Does that make sense?
You killed it, man. I mean, that's dead on for sure.
Yeah. So I think that's a struggle because we knowing what's best for somebody, we still have to sell them what they want, knowing on the back end that we're going to lead them through a process to give them what they need.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So you have to give them the right carrot on the end of the stick. So you're selling them on leads. That's what gets you the appointment.
Yep.
So give me an idea of what the interview process with your team looks like.
So, I mean, obviously, like in the beginning, again, you don't have a lot of brand awareness. Like, I mean, literally, I would open up my computer and like
Mm-hmm.
show people the leads. And again, in the beginning, I had kind of an open door policy. But as things, progressed, I started being a little bit more cautious with who I hired.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, ultimately, like, again, I mentioned earlier, like you can do all these different, implement all these different processes to interview people,
Mm-hmm.
but like be a little bit basically, okay, the number one requirement is make sure you hire someone that's full-time and fully committed to real estate. Like 8 to 5, they can be plugged in. So that's like
Mm-hmm.
the number one thing I want to find out in the interview process is if they can make that kind of commitment.
Okay.
But then, you can be a little bit loose in your hiring process if you have this very rigorous 30-day ramp-up process where you're not afraid to fire them if they don't perform. And
Okay.
you've got to be really strict to make sure when someone doesn't hit these metrics that you're letting them go. Because number one, you're going to look like a horrible leader if you set these expectations with everybody
Right.
on the team and then you don't let them go. And then you could also potentially fill up your organization with all these very mediocre people.
Yeah.
So that's the key thing
Mm.
in the interview is find out that they're full-time committed. There's some other things we look for, like core values, for example, like try to drill down to like what do they really value as like a human being.
Mm-hmm.
Like do they have a passion for people? Are they humble? Are they coachable? Like you try to identify those things in the interview process and do your
Mm.
best. There's some great tools out there to do that that you can use as a questionnaire. But ultimately it comes down to seeing them actually perform. And so
Mm.
our initial interview, I think it's very how it was back then compared to now, vastly different.
Mm-hmm.
I would try to encourage people, like when you go meet someone for the first time, just try to put yourself in the shoes of a buyer or seller and just like wonder how would you feel like if you were meeting this agent, right? Because like if you send that candidate a lead, like that's probably how the consumer is going to feel when they meet them. So
Mm-hmm.
very simplistic approach. Like if you were the customer, how would that candidate make you feel?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how we approach the first interview. And then if we
Yeah.
want, and then if we want to keep the conversation going further, then we dive a little bit deeper, potentially with a follow-up interview and try to understand them more as like, from a core value perspective and like what their kind of long-term career goals are and trajectory. And then we offer them an opportunity to go in this 30-day kind of trial basis where we'll give them all the tools, the training they need to like kind of get going,
Mm-hmm.
and then these very high performance standards, and that they either hit or they don't. So
Right.
yeah.
Love it. Cool. I love it. Yeah, and it's I'm fascinated by the idea of building into the interview process the very things that will expose the stuff that you don't want. And Jeff has a great example. I wish he was here to share it, but one of the things that they ask the recruits to do in the middle of the recruiting process is to read a book. Now, how easy is it nowadays to read a book? You can get the clip. I mean, you can go online, you can listen to podcasts by the author, you can listen to the whole freaking thing on Audible if you want. I mean, it's a lot easier. It's not like doing a book report in high school where, you might get caught by watching the wrong movie.
Yep.
So it's interesting to see that stuff like that, people that you would have thought would go through that process and be gung-ho about it, they won't make it through something simple like that. They won't read. They can't discipline themselves to read or to even listen to something on Audible for a few hours to do something that they claim they're super committed to do. So I'm like that. That's one of the things that I think Jeff is super smart about, building something like that into there to just expose how committed somebody is. Because if they really want to succeed, that's something that they should be doing anyway.
Yep,
right? They should be
exactly.
coming to you and they've read a book before they
Yep.
got to you. And this should be just like, oh man, this is a cool book. I should read this.
Yeah.
You want stuff like that. You want them to be already exhibiting the behaviors that you want. And you mentioned that example where you want to see what their natural reaction is when somebody throws an objection at them. And it's so perfect because you're looking for somebody, in this situation, it's a salesperson. You're looking for somebody that just has, when they're under stress, they have the right reaction.
Yep.
And I think we lose sight of that a lot.
Literally, you just gave me a huge nugget. I'm going to go implement that in our 30
Oh, the
days.
book thing?
And
Yeah,
ask
I'm
people
surprised you
to
and Jeff didn't talk about that already.
Yeah. I'm
Yep.
gonna,
I think he makes them read the one thing, if I remember right.
nice.
Which
That's
is
a great,
very readable. It's
yeah.
relatively, I mean, it's, there's a bunch of illustrations and it's certainly not a dry, it's not like he's asked them to read like managing the professional services firm or something like that. It's
Yep.
not super high level business stuff. So anyway, yeah, that's a really good thing that I
Dude,
like
I
about
love
their
that,
interview
man. I'm going to
process.
share that with our team for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
That's
it's good
awesome.
stuff. Okay, cool. So let's. There's one last thing I wanted to get into, just because I know the bigger scheme of what you're doing around the country and the book and how you basically systematized what you've done and you're creating a package that other people can plug into. So tell people real quick, kind of in the big scheme of things, what makes the systems that you've built for your team in Austin that you feel like people can plug into and reproduce in other markets? What are a few of the maybe two or three things that really set you guys apart that you've built and systematized that you're really proud of?
I mean, ultimately, it boils down to one thing. Like, yes, there are like the number of deliverables that we give to the people we partner with to help them grow their companies and their respective teams. The
Mm-hmm.
deliverables is like mind-boggling. It's like a 7-page Excel spreadsheet of like line items. Like, it's an
Mm-hmm.
ungodly amount of things we're giving our partners: listing presentations, buyer presentations, an online training platform to help with like your inside salesperson, your listing agent, your buyer's agent, your transaction coordinators. Like, dude, the list goes on and on of all this stuff we're like giving to our to the people we're partnering with. But ultimately, like the one thing, speaking of the book, the thing that makes all that unnecessary is having a proven roadmap, and helping like coach people through that process so they know when exactly to implement what to get the results they want, and in a much faster than I was able to do.
Yeah.
So like, for example, the gal we partner with in Amarillo, she grew 300% in her first year. Like my first year of starting a team, we grew to just shy of 100 transactions like she did, but
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't profitable. I mean, I was profitable, but like my net income was horrible.
Okay.
I had 15 salespeople do like just shy of 100 deals, and she had two salespeople and an assistant do just shy of 100 deals
Mm.
in her first full year. And so she was crazy profitable. She's was really disciplined about identifying her first like buyer agent team leader. So ultimately, like the single one thing is it's having a partner that's been through it and knows the journey better than anybody else. There's other books out there, real estate specific, and a lot of the information collected in those books is like surveyed data, right? Like from a lot of different random people in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's all like compiled into a book. And then there's there's books out there people could read, right, to try to learn how to build a team. But again, it's very segmented. There's amazing coaches out there like you guys, and I think you would agree with this. Like every coaching system out there, like they really have kind of a specialty, right? Like some are really good at
Mm-hmm.
lead generation and marketing. Some are good at processes and systems. Some are great at sales training, like just
Mm-hmm.
working with your sales team to understand
Yeah.
scripts.
They all have something. They have like a core competency.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a core competency. And so like when you're trying to like build a team and navigate this very windy road, like it's a very segmented industry. Same with technology. There's like a
Mm-hmm.
gazillion different technology applications out there, and you can go waste and burn so much money
Yeah.
testing things. And we've already done all that heavy lifting. Like we've tested every single system imaginable. I've personally spent north of $5 million just on lead generation, just on lead gen, testing everything imaginable. Like literally, I'm always running across new things to test, but like
Mm-hmm.
everything you could probably throw at me, I've tested and I've wasted money on, and in
Right.
the hundreds of thousands, like per campaign.
Yeah.
And so, like
Mm.
that's the real value to people we partner with. And I keep using the word partner, and that's like been getting thrown around a lot the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what we created was, we developed a franchise system. So like I remember like when I started the team 7 years ago, I went and like looked at all the different franchise systems out there: Remax, Coldwell Banker, Century 21, Better Homes and Garden, ER. Like there's tons of them, right? And like, I read their manuals, and, you know, they give you these 3-inch thick books, and like, you know, it's kind of the recipe, and, you know, ultimately like they're teaching you how to get really good at recruiting and building a massive organization with hundreds and hundreds of agents. And it's all about agent count.
Yep.
So like everything you get from the franchisor, that like you're paying for all their deliverables or whatever, is all to help you recruit massive numbers of agents.
Yeah.
So like, I couldn't find a franchise system that I could join to have a shortcut to success, if you will, for the team model, right? Like, there's not a franchise system you can buy that is 100% team driven. It doesn't exist. Like, if someone throws one at me, like, we could have a debate about this, because there's one that a lot of people bring up, but it's not in 100% alignment with helping people build teams. And the franchisor doesn't personally have a team that is kind of like this research lab, if you will, like testing all the different things that are coming up as time progresses that help you grow and expand your business. So our goal is to find other people around the US, basically get them on as a franchisee. We give them every single deliverable imaginable to build their business. We give them the roadmap, and then we help coach them to implement that roadmap. I still would encourage like any of our partners or franchisees to go hire a coach like you guys, you know. So like, you know, we're not drilling into like one specific activity of like improving lead gen or improving, you know, sales. Like, we're basically giving them all of these tools, documentation, HR related stuff, telling them, you know, which technology tools to go get, like giving them all the ingredients to bake the cake of a successful team. And then, you know, basically telling them, okay, you need to implement this now. Okay, now you're at this stage, implement this. Like, in the book we wrote, this is literally, you know, this is not some like BS ebook. This is over 200 pages. Took us almost a year to write, and it's like it's my journey of like building a team, and I've got all my failures in there and all my ahas. And so our goal is to, you know, this is kind of like a blueprint, if you will, but our goal is to, with our franchisees, is to provide like a super high touch, high level, you know, kind of partner relationship where we're helping them build their business and go from ultimately captain everything, right? Wearing all these different hats, to an ownership mentality where they legitimately own their office. And ideally they have a sellable asset that they could go sell off to some company, not a team or whatever that's built underneath someone else's organization, right? Like, it's, you own the office, you own this organization, like all the things that you've implemented, like you own, and you could easily go sell to somebody else. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do.
Cool. And how do people connect with you to learn more?
I think the first thing is probably go buy the book. It's wirbook.com. Like, I'm not in the business of selling books. Like you and I were talking before the podcast, like I wrote, like literally we wrote this book because we had so much success with these two partners in Amarillo and San Antonio. We were like, you know what, like, how can we get this out to the masses? This very refined system that we developed, how can we get this to the masses? And there was this hole, in my opinion, in the franchise world. And so we wrote the book to find other amazing people to partner with that just have this, you know, unquenchable thirst to, you know, build something great, and you know, are coachable and humble and kind of exude kind of the same core values we do, just being very resilient, driven, fiercely committed people. And so like the book was kind of like a way for us to connect with other people across the country. And like ultimately our goal is hopefully you read the book and you like it and you're like, man, this is this is kind of overwhelming. And it is. Building a team is freaking overwhelming.
Yeah.
You're wearing a lot of hats and it's definitely stressful and it's not easy. I think in fact, like the first chapter of the book, like I'm telling people all the reasons not to start a team because like it's freaking hard. Like it's not easy. It's stressful. You're wearing a lot of hats and it's not an easy feat. There's not that many like crazy successful teams across the United States for a reason. So if you like what you read in the book, then I'd love for you to reach out to us. I basically like started opening up the door for our office here in Austin to people about 2 months ago. And like, I have people flying in from all over the United States coming here and shadowing us, like our team. Like they see what our inside sales guys are doing, our recruiter, our team leaders, our agents. They get to see everything that we kind of do and get a feel for what it is we're doing. Because, it's one thing to like talk and like, say like, I've got all this, A, B, and C things going on. It's another thing when you actually like walk in the office and like you see people in the weeds and like actually implementing all these tactical things and like going through the motions, taking action. So, so read the book. If you like the book, reach out to us. My personal number is in the book. We're not out there like actively pushing the book, right? Like I haven't even put it on Amazon or Kindle or iTunes or any of that because like I want to know who's reading the book, because like I'm looking for people that want to grow and build like an amazing organization in their respective city. So yeah, I mean, you're not gonna see this book in the airport or at Barnes and Nobles. I mean, it's literally written for people in the industry only. Like it only makes sense to people in the industry.
Right.
So I'd invite anybody to come to Austin, spend the week with us. And, if it's a win-win, like I'd love the opportunity to work with anybody and help them grow their company.
Cool. Love it, man. That's an interesting strategy. We'll have to revisit that and see if you like it, like going that direction versus having it like mass available. Cause they're two very different strategies, but I like where your head's at, which is I want to know who's reading the book and I want to follow up with them and I want to have it that you want control, because it's a completely different type of reason to write a book, right? You want to use it to attract the people that you want. So anyway, very fascinated with that. Guys, just to wrap things up for us, for the Team Building Podcast, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, all those places. If you're interested in more information about what we do, both on the consulting side, the live stream program, the team building workshops that we do at Jeff's flagship office in Omaha, go to eliterealestatesystems.com. And so that'll do it for this particular episode. Chris, appreciate it. Hang out with me and then we'll wrap things up.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for having me on.